Hello, everybody. Welcome to 113th version. It's a special edition of the Frank and Stan chat. So the reason why it's special is I suppose I just felt as though I've reached a point with Ofsted where I felt as though Stan and I just needed to sort of record our feelings about where we are at the moment, as because we're in middle of July. I think Wales recorded its highest temperature in its history or in living memory or whatever it is since records began, and I think England's likely to reach that target today. And I have to say, it's incredibly hot. My daughter, who teaches in a primary school in South Manchester, shared the thermometer reading for her classroom at 7:51 this morning at 28.3 degrees. So we're hearing, aren't we, Stan, of Ofsted inspecting, and knowing we've all known that this, we're fairly confident. At least the government have been warning us that temperatures are going to be at record levels, and we've got Ofsted crawling all over schools at the moment. And I issued a tweet on, I think it was Friday or Saturday. I think it was Saturday. And as I said, Stan, I've never had anything pull such a response. And I have to say, you sometimes worry about on Twitter, will everybody go for you? I have to say 99.9% of people agreed that, the point I was making, that this is about Ofsted hitting an inspection target as opposed to offering a fair inspection for those schools this week. And it just is
or being, with a small p, politically aware.
Yeah.
There's the phrase "read the room." When the government's saying, there's risk to life in high temperatures, it's not hard to think, I tell you what, let's not inspect over those few days, because one, our inspectors won't be at their best working in high temperatures. The school will not be in a normal situation. And as it's very, very close to the end of the school year, the school's not likely to be doing the things we would see in September, October, January, March, etc. So we're not getting a fair comparison. That, to me, doesn't seem to be rocket science. It seems to be a logical approach to an additional problem at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And I don't honestly know why Ofsted inspecting the last week or two.
Well,
I don't know.
I think you heard, well, the guidance says that they won't inspect, or they would. I think the wording is not that they won't, but they won't normally. And I've written these papers as for them, and I know that there are sort of these little words that pop into the sentence that give them flex. But you heard of one, I think, was it one that they're actually being inspected today and tomorrow? Today being Tuesday, tomorrow being Wednesday, and Wednesday is their last day. Is that correct?
Yeah, they've deferred it, I think. I think it's been deferred. But
Right.
again, you have to go through a process to defer it.
Well,
and certainly one of the schools that we've got some connections with got a phone call on Friday for a Section 5 on Monday.
Yeah. See, the thing for me is that that we're now in a position where some local authorities have closed. So the number of schools that are available for inspection has reduced, but probably the workforce hasn't. And so there is this sort of like, I don't know whether it's a performance target for an individual director or for the chief inspector, but actually that seems to be driving their desire to carry on inspecting. I mean, I got a response to that tweet that I sent out, and from one of the Ofsted directors, and it was basically saying, well, if they're open, we're inspecting, and if they don't, if they object, then they can go down the deferral route. And I replied by saying, actually, none of you, not one of you in that senior leadership team has ever had to work through an inspection on the other side. They don't understand. They just think, oh, well, the head will decide that they'll defer. As far as I'm aware, I don't know about you, Stan, but I generally consult with my couple of senior leaders that would then filter into the staff room. Ofsted have called. There'd then be some teachers who want the Ofsted, get it out of the way. Others who think this is ridiculous. You then think, well, if I'm going down a deferral route, I probably ought to let the chair of governors know. So getting yourself in a position with all your ducks lined up so you can actually then say to Ofsted, actually, we're seeking a deferral, and then have to explain to Ofsted why the deferral, then wait for the regional director of Ofsted to decide whether or not the deferral should be granted. On top of the fact you've got temperatures in their 40s, it really highlights to me, and I throughout this, I still, I think we've always said we still believe in inspection, but actually, as you said, this is a massive own goal.
Again, it widens the gap when people were kind of saying, well, maybe through the pandemic they didn't quite get it right, but things are stabilizing now. This is just another really, really short-sighted view to go ahead. I remember, if you remember, when we were inspectors couldn't.
This was inspectors
a long time ago,
working with Ofsted, weren't we? We were in effect quasi HMI.
Yeah, you weren't. The position at the time was that you couldn't inspect on the first or the last week of term, but when I got as a lead inspector an inspection to do the first week in January, the first day back after Christmas, and I said, but we can't. They said, oh, we can, because you're working for Ofsted now, so we can do that. And we had an inspection date it would have been the 3rd of January or something. So I know I started the day, there were 4-day inspections in those days, by going to the head and saying, the team are going to be busy preparing for the first half of day 1.
Yeah.
So we won't be able, I'm sorry, but we won't be able to get out into the classes. So if you need to do all what have you done for Christmas, share what you've had and get rid of all that excitement, then there's a time to do it. We'll be too busy to get involved at that point. And I'm sure the school appreciated it.
Yeah, well, it's funny. A couple of people responded. One person responded to say that their school had been informally informed by Ofsted that they would be inspected on Monday, and they were told that on the Friday. I'm not aware that happened, but in a way, I can't vouch whether that was true or not. But for me, it's not about. It's not about a PR exercise, even though there are times when you wonder whether or not, Ofsted does have anybody advising them on communication, strategies. But actually, it's really about, what's fair and what's right, and actually, somebody mentioned about, a duty of care that Ofsted offer in, as one of the reasons that they exist, this sort of safeguarding element of it. I just think that that feels like it's out the window at the moment.
Yeah, but for me, Frank, taking aside the disruption to the school, it's the fact that they're not comparable inspections. So one of them is worthless. Either the one done in a school in October when everything's running properly is the accurate dead-on one, or the one running when it's 40 degrees and it's the last day of term and the school are trying to pack in all the things that you try and get in at the end of term.
Yes.
Which of those two are invalid? Because you cannot compare those two contextually. No. And neither of those two, in my view, can be compared to the framework and then said they're equally based on the framework, because they're just not.
Ofsted's got a previous on this, hasn't it? In that we had the problem about wanting to carry on inspecting while we were coming out of lockdowns and whatever, where other parts of the UK, other inspectorates have decided that we won't be inspecting during that period of time, but Ofsted just said, we're going to rock on. We're just going to roll forward.
Don't you think, of course, Ofsted are not related directly to the DfE or government.
No, of course.
That's arm's distance, inspecting without fear or favour. But to me, it's part of the culture of the current DfE government, big state, if you want to call it that, of we're macho, we're not woke, we're not snowflakes, we'll just get on and we'll do, and you'll do as you're told. And I just think there's no need for it.
No. No.
And people who work like that never ever get the best results. Never. So I don't get it, and I don't see why somebody in charge of it can't just take a breath and say, perhaps we got this one wrong. Even now, to issue a thing to say, on reflection, maybe we couldn't make a fair assessment of these schools because of the context and the circumstances they're in during the time of the inspection.
Yeah. They're not good at that, though, are they, Stan?
Oh, they won't do it because that seems a bit soft.
And also that they're not good because they're not good at that because the number of judgments that get overturned. It's Ofsted can't be seen to be wrong.
No.
Because the whole edifice will fall.
It's a very clever complaints procedure, isn't it? That only goes to Ofsted. You can't see the evidence, but they can tell you the outcome.
I know.
Seems fair.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing at the moment, with previous is there's quite a lot being said. I saw Sir Kevin Collins talking about, the recovery, work that he put forward, this £15 billion of investment. He said it looks like it might just peter out to be just a few bits of tutoring going on somewhere in schools that choose to do it, and actually at a time when you think, there is an independent inspectorate that should be reporting to Parliament on the effectiveness of schools. I'm at a loss to know, and you and I have read many recent reports. I'm at a loss to know where that evidence is. At least it's not being shared. Parents are not finding out of schools that have been inspected whether or not the school's efforts, either during the pandemic or the efforts to help children recover, are actually really good enough. Because if they were, and if they were as ambitious as Sir Kevin Collins was, they would be running a horse and coaches through most of these reports. But they're not. It's just simply not there. It's as if, like Ofsted's approach was, what pandemic? When did that happen? That was a long time ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, you hear some horrific stuff. I mean, I know this one is a fact. I've heard this one straight from the horse's mouth, where an issue was raised on British values, and the school was saying, this is what we do. We do a museum visit. We do this. We go to the local mosque. Well, you've not been there in 2 years. No, we haven't been able to go for 2 years. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. So somebody should have overridden all the COVID rules in order that your school can put a tick in a box against British citizenship.
Yeah.
I
do think, though, that I still have sufficient trust in, although I don't know as many as I used to in HMI and what have you. I still think there is an independent voice there. But actually, this is around senior leadership in Ofsted falling short, failing.
I think this is Woolworths. This is Woolworths because it's not changed with the times. And if you go back to 95, yes, schools did need a good looking at. But now we've probably got, even with tougher frameworks, we've probably still only got 5% of schools that aren't hitting the mark. Then it's a waste of money.
Yeah.
It's actually a waste of money, and we haven't moved it on because we still think the way to do it is to go in, talk to children, write a 2-page report, and condemn a school over 2 days because a child didn't know that the Vikings didn't invent dragons. That's another example.
I shouldn't laugh because it's so damn serious, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not a laughing matter, Frank.
Well, I've talked to governors who are saying, we're aiming for our school to be outstanding. And I've said, aim for your school to be excellent.
Yeah.
Aim for your school to be the best it could possibly be. If you get an outstanding judgment, that's a plus.
Yeah.
But there's no guarantee, because on the day, the inspector might pick on the wrong 3 children to have a conversation with, and you might end up not where you want to be.
Let's think about it in terms of that judgment now, because we'll finish on this. If you get an outstanding judgment on an inspection this week, going back to the point you're making, how reliable is that judgment? How really reliable is that? and actually, if you get it, is it being given primarily because actually there's something being given to, well, it was really hard for all the kids and the staff,
Yeah.
and they really stepped up for those 2 days, and you inspectors did the same. Is that
Or is it
really
that
as reliable?
the inspectors boiling hot, working in a room that's got no ventilation, and thinking, I just need to get this written and away.
Well, it does make you wonder. I mean, a number of tweets were saying, inspectors that are out there, this week, these last 2 days, you really do need to have a think about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And there are some of those who are contracted to Ofsted who have no choice, but you do have a choice, don't you?
Yeah.
I had a choice.
You always have a
I took
choice.
my choice. So I think I really think this.
Frank, I mean, even all those years ago, I just felt when we'd done the best part of 18 months, I suppose, working with HMI, I just got the feeling that their care for the people who were working for them wasn't really that great. And that was one of the, because in my ambition from very early on in teaching, being an HMI was the end point of what I wanted to do. That's how I wanted to finish. But I just felt when we had that 18 months, do you know what? I'm not convinced they are not just using me as a pawn in the game. And I felt much happier going back into headship and then into the local authority.
Well, of course, I went back, but I then had that sort of moment in 2012 where I thought, I can't sustain this. But personally, I can't sustain it any longer. But also, I just wasn't convinced that the point you were making at the beginning when we started doing it in '95, some schools were in a really bad place, and actually, I think by the time we got to 2012, we were nationally, we're in a much stronger place, but there was no real adaptation to the inspection framework to accommodate that improvement. It was just drive the thing harder, keep your foot on the accelerator, go for something different, and in effect, make it look as though Ofsted's got a purpose, a reason for existing.
But you could go now to outstanding schools, good schools, and say a drop-in visit from an HMI once every 2 years with a note to the head teacher. If there was anything that triggered, then a notice that we will inspect within the next 12 months. That would be one, a heck of a lot cheaper. It would give schools the confidence that they can innovate and they can
and be open, much more open with inspectors.
Aim it at self-evaluation rather than outcomes, and say to the school, how well are you doing? How do you know? Let's have a look at your results, either tick in a box, or I think there's one or two things we need to look at in a bit more detail. And then have, not so it's a section 5 or it's a section 8, then have we'll either have a couple of inspectors in for 2 days, again, to do an informal report on where we think you need to go next, or a formal inspection, which becomes 4 or 5 inspectors for the week and a full report.
But as we say, 5%, that figure about that fall into special measures has not changed.
And the stuck school shows that it's not having an impact.
That was, I mean, we've gone way over here, haven't we? But actually, that there was the EPI report about disadvantaged children came out yesterday or the day before yesterday it was, and you think, well, where's Ofsted and all that? In effect, there's been since 2012.
I'm not ready yet.
I think it's 2012. There's been virtually marginal improvement in the performance of disadvantaged pupils during that time. Well, but schools have got better, according to Ofsted. We, in a way, things are not being joined up here. I think there's a complacency in terms of, the honesty at which Ofsted is considering its impact. I think it's quite suspect, really, in terms of its impact in terms of serving the whole service, the whole education service. It's still looking at individual inspections on individual institutions. Is so outdated.
Yeah, what it's doing is frightening schools into changing the way they work without, in my view, the real evidence that what they're suggesting is an improvement for all schools. I have
Well,
yet
that's
to
the
see
key, isn't it?
anything that's an improvement for all schools.
Yeah. Okay, well, we've had our rant, or at least I had mine.
Well, I think we should still say that we, I still think Ofsted has got an important role to play in schools.
I agree.
But again, I thought Woolworths had an important part to play in the high street.
in the pick and mix.
If you don't change, if you don't adapt to the circumstances, if you don't read the room and think, actually, what we're doing isn't right, if I'm too bothered about keeping my job than I am about the impact we're having on schools, then it's going to fall by the wayside eventually, and it doesn't need to, because it's good enough.
Yeah.
Okay, that's my rant.
Well, good. We've got 114th on Friday, and that's with Peter Cox. Peter is a CEO, and actually I don't know if he still inspects, but he has done quite a lot of inspection. So be chatting to Peter on Friday, and then we'll be having our sort of 6-7 week break before we come back again. And we have just confirmed the date for Sir David Carter, which is in mid-September. So I'm really looking forward to that as well. So anyway, until later in the week, we'll see you all soon. Bye.
Bye.